It was supposed to be another routine moment in Parliament, a chance for Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer to flex his polished rhetoric and fire off some rehearsed lines at the government. But what unfolded was anything but predictable. In a scene that quickly caught fire online, Starmer found himself on the defensive, squirming under a barrage of questions and facts he wasn't prepared to answer. The spotlight, often his friend, turned harsh and unforgiving. He was caught out, red-handed, on two of the most crucial issues dominating British political discourse today, the net zero agenda and the winter fuel payments. And the reaction? Absolutely explosive. It all began with what seemed like a simple exchange over Labour's energy policy, particularly around the public commitment to the net zero target. Starmer has made no secret of his alignment with the green agenda, promising bold steps towards achieving net zero emissions by 2050. But behind the speeches and glossy campaign videos, cracks are beginning to show, and those cracks were pried wide open. As he spoke confidently about Labour's Green Plan, members of the chamber, and increasingly, the public, began to question whether the promises matched reality. Starmer claimed his party had a fully costed, responsible plan to move away from fossil fuels. But when challenged for specifics, especially on how the transition would affect working-class families already struggling with high bills, he faltered. A fiery MP from the Conservative bench interrupted, his voice cutting through the chamber. "How can you talk about net zero when you can't even explain how you'll keep pensioners warm this winter?" The jab wasn't just political, it was personal, and it struck a nerve. Starmer's expression tightened. His previous remarks about scrapping new oil and gas licenses, while simultaneously promising energy security, now seemed hollow and contradictory. As he tried to defend himself, facts began to emerge that made it clear. Starmer had either misunderstood his own policy, or worse, had misrepresented it. What followed was a devastating unraveling. Critics pointed to Labour's previous pledges to scale back fossil fuel investment while pushing for expensive green alternatives. But Starmer failed to explain how these moves wouldn't drive up household energy prices or create long-term shortages in winter. Worse, documents surfaced during the debate indicating that Labour's figures around funding the net zero transition were based on outdated data. The plan, hailed as ambitious, now looked reckless. And in politics, optics are everything. As Starmer stumbled over numbers and retracted claims in real time, murmurs grew louder. He wasn't just being challenged, he was being shamed. And then came the knockout punch, the issue of winter fuel payments. For millions of elderly and vulnerable Britons, these payments are a lifeline. They are the thin shield against freezing nights and rising gas bills. In previous speeches, Starmer had claimed Labour would protect and expand these benefits. But during the exchange, it became clear that Labour's actual position was far murkier. One megapixel, with a copy of Labour's recent budget analysis in hand, asked, "Sir Keir, are you telling us that you'll protect winter fuel payments while simultaneously committing to cuts in fossil fuel subsidies, which fund them?" Starmer paused, too long. The silence spoke volumes. He tried to shift the conversation, accusing the government of fear-mongering, but the damage had already been done. What came next was chaos. The benches erupted. Accusations flew. MPs demanded clarity. Journalists immediately began fact-checking every claim. And as the dust settled, a new narrative began to take shape, one that painted Starmer not as a responsible leader with a long-term vision, but as a politician caught in a web of contradictions. His green dream, while idealistic, now seemed detached from the gritty realities of everyday life in Britain. And his promises to shield vulnerable citizens in winter appeared less like commitments and more like political theatre. Viewers across the country took notice. On social media, clips from the exchange went viral. Some showed Starmer dodging direct questions. Others highlighted the sharp rebukes he received from his opponents. Even former Labour supporters chimed in, voicing their disappointment. "This isn't the leadership we were promised," wrote one commenter. Another posted, "Net zero is a fantasy if you can't keep the lights on in December." The momentum Starmer had been building over months appeared to be slipping through his fingers. But perhaps most damaging of all was the perception that he had lied, or at the very least, misled the public. For weeks, Labour had presented its energy plan as robust, fair, and economically sound. Yet when pressed, Starmer couldn't explain where the funding would come from. He couldn't reconcile the promises of green reform with the financial realities of low-income households. And he couldn't answer why his team had quietly walked back its pledges on winter fuel payments in recent policy briefings. In politics, perception often matters more than truth, and the perception was clear: Starmer had been caught out. This moment matters, not just for Starmer, but for the country. The UK is at a critical crossroads. Energy prices are soaring. Inflation is squeezing families dry. And with the coldest months of the year approaching, people want answers, not slogans. They want plans that are costed, practical, and transparent. For Starmer to position himself as a future Prime Minister, he must command trust. But after this interaction, many are asking, can we really trust him? The fallout continued. The following day, major broadcasters dissected every second of the exchange. Experts weighed in. Economists pointed out the gaps in Labour's proposals. Environmentalists expressed concern that Starmer's missteps could delegitimize the broader climate movement. And political analysts were blunt: Starmer had suffered a self-inflicted wound, and it might not heal quickly. Even inside Labour, murmurs began to grow louder. Some MPs privately expressed frustration, saying they had warned the leadership that the messaging around energy policy was too vague and too idealistic. Of course, politics is rarely static. A single bad day doesn't end a career. But this was more than just a bad day. It was a moment of reckoning. The kind of moment that lingers. The kind of moment that becomes campaign material in future elections. The footage of Starmer blinking under pressure, fumbling through figures, and evading questions may well be replayed countless times in the coming months. And the message it sends is damning, that when it comes to the hard details, when the cameras are rolling and the questions are sharp, Starmer doesn't have the answers. In the wake of this disaster, Labour attempted damage control. Spokespeople clarified that Starmer misspoke on certain points. Others suggested that the party's official energy policy was still under review, allowing for flexibility moving forward. But the public wasn't buying it. As one viral tweet put it, if you don't know your policy, don't pretend you do. And therein lies the problem. It's not just that Starmer got caught out, it's that he tried to power through the lie, hoping no one would notice. But people noticed. And now they're talking. This fiery clash over net zero and winter fuel payments has become a defining episode in Starmer's leadership. It exposed weaknesses that many had suspected but few had seen so clearly. It showed that underneath the polish, the sound bites, and the photo ops, there are serious gaps in Labour's policy coherence. And it reminded the public that charisma is no substitute for credibility. What comes next is uncertain. Starmer could recover. He could tighten his policy, strengthen his team, and restore public confidence. Or he could continue down the path of vague commitments and empty assurances, at his peril. Because the British people are watching. They've seen what happens when a leader is caught out. And they won't forget. The fiery interaction in Parliament may be over, but the fallout is just beginning. Starmer's credibility has taken a major hit. The questions aren't going away. The cameras are still rolling. And with every day that passes without clarity, the doubt grows louder. Can Sir Keir Starmer lead the country through an energy crisis? Can he be trusted on net zero? Can he be believed on winter fuel payments? Right now, the answers to those questions are as cold as the homes he's struggling to protect.